Hi, this is John Rowell for the Rowell Report. Today is Thursday, September 18th, 2025, and I'm back for another video. This time, I want to give a big applause to the Oscar-winning performance of Senator John Kennedy, who's going to present to us that it's urgent that we, in this very moment, seize all of the frozen Russian assets in the United States. No, he's talking about Belgium. Yes, Belgium, which is another country on the other side of the Atlantic. And in Belgium, there's a company called EuroClear. And EuroClear is a holding a company that um, that was holding frozen Russian assets, and that was making money for them. And so they were doing their due diligence, so to speak, the Russians, by putting the money here. Not too sure why they didn't pull it out before this special military operation, but anyway, those funds were frozen and they've been sitting there. And ever since February 2022, they've been talking about seizing these assets and giving them to the Ukrainians, and then they would win the war. Yes, they would win the war. So anyway, but we want to take a look at this Oscar-winning performance for Senator John Kennedy. Such a capable speaker, and so much drama, so much emotion, so much feeling, so much angst. So he went back to his, to his acting days, if he ever had any, and he was going to pull out every trick in the book so he can point out that it's urgent at this moment to seize those assets. So first thing we see here is Senator Kennedy. He's holding up this image, and it's bodies in a trench. So we can see that there's bodies in a trench, and there's three people who are moving another body to the trench in an open spot where they have room to put the body. So we don't know the history behind why those bodies are there. We know it's this is about a couple weeks into the special military operation, so we don't know were these individuals who were killed by Ukrainian fire, by Russian fire. I mean, we still had COVID going on at this time, and people are still driving. There's car accidents. People still have disputes. We don't know why those people are there. So we're made to believe that the only reason why um, these people are being put in the trenches because of the Russians. And you can say, well, if they hadn't invaded Ukraine, then this never would have happened. Well, we need to go back about 8 years before the special military operation. This was in 2014. There was something called the Euromaidan, which was a CIA and MI6 engineered coup of the democratically elected government of Viktor Yanukovych, who fled the country at the end of this coup d'état. So anyway, they installed a new government, and this government the first government that was installed was one that was set up by Victoria Nuland, who was in the square in Kiev, passing out cookies and all that during this standoff between the protesters and the government. And before they brought in their forces to carry out the final work of the overthrow of this government. So after this government was overthrown by the CIA and MI6, um, and you say, no, that's not true. It was the Ukrainian people who overthrew. They did it on their own, without anyone's help, without anyone's direction. So then why was Victoria Nuland on the cell phone? She was recorded picking out all the members of the cabinet who would be leading Ukraine. I mean, it couldn't have been more obvious. But the United States had been treating Ukraine as a de facto NATO nation since 1995. They were beefing up their military. They were putting funds towards um, propagandizing the people, telling them that the Russians were the most evil people on the planet, and they needed to fight for their culture, for their language, and they needed to push all the Russian people out of Ukraine. Anyone who didn't want to submit had to leave. So anyway, after this 2014 Euromaidan, there were regions in Russia that decided that they weren't going to put up with being mistreated, and their leaders were being killed, their cities were being shelled. So they started to get together and form militias, and these militias were the backbone of of this civil war, of this revolution against the U.S. sponsored government in Kiev, so that the Ukrainian people could hold on to their basic rights. And at this point, in 2014, from 2014 to 2022, President Putin in Moscow um, tried to tried to um, find a solution so that the ethnic Russians in Ukraine could continue to live in peace, and they could continue to practice their religion, speak their languages in markets and businesses. They have their media companies, and but anyway, all that was being outlawed little by little, and they were taking away their rights. So anyway, so we have this civil war that's going on in full blown civil war, and so um, the final straw why Russia invaded Ukraine was that President Putin called President Biden over the Christmas holiday and said, "Well, you're not thinking about putting missiles into Ukraine, are you?" And President Biden, he was by himself, so he was improvising. He didn't have anyone to tell him what the answer was. And Joe Biden was already mentally challenged. So he said, "Oh no, we're not thinking about putting missiles in Ukraine." So, and anyway, then in January of 2022, this invasion of Ukraine still could have been stopped. And so Sergei Lavrov of Russia asked Antony Blinken of the United States, "Are you thinking of putting missiles into Ukraine?" And Antony Blinken couldn't guarantee that that they wouldn't put any missiles into Ukraine, and he couldn't guarantee that they wouldn't put nuclear missiles into Ukraine. So that put up a giant, this is like the last straw. So on February 2022, Russia first invaded, and what they tried to do was to force the Ukrainians to do the right thing, to give the breakaway regions in Ukraine their rights as human beings, to be able to speak their language, to have their culture, to practice their religion as they saw fit. And in any case, this wasn't a full scale invasion. This was about 80,000 troops. And so, if you know that Ukraine has 1 million troops, so anyway, there's definitely a mismatch, 80,000 to 1 million. So you can't tell me that was a full scale invasion. And so, basically, what happened was they asked President Putin to take the troops from Kiev and move them outside Kiev, and then they would do the right thing. So they said, "We just need security guarantees. Just move outside of Kiev, and then everything will be fine." Well, once they moved the troops outside of Kiev, then they were attacked. So then this became a full scale war, but it wasn't a full scale invasion. It was very small, and it was all designed to try to force Kiev to carry out what they had already promised in the Minsk agreement. They had already signed the dotted line. So anyway, now we go to 2022. The Ukrainian um, the Ukrainian civil war has morphed into a Russia Ukraine military conflict. So I think that's important to keep that clear. This wasn't, spur of the moment, out of the blue invasion of Ukraine. This was something that could have been stopped, but the United States was pushing as hard as they could to try to get NATO right up to the border with Russia, and Russia said, no, this is the red line, and we're done talking. So, anyway, so we have this image which is coming from Ukraine, from Mariupol, and March 2022. So the special military operation was 2 weeks in, and we don't know why the bodies are there. The Azov Brigade was on the outside of Mariupol, and these are the Banderites. These are the uh, you know, ones that have Nazi tattoos, they have Nazi flags, they have a Nazi ideology about the superior race and about the purity of their genes, and all this wacko stuff about that sounds very similar to the German, the Ubermensch and the superior people and all that stuff. So anyway, the the Ukrainians were taking up firing positions on the top of high rise buildings, and they were putting their military equipment between buildings, and all these buildings were occupied. So, as the Russians advanced, they were firing on the Ukrainian positions, and these positions were in and on top of and nearby inhabited buildings, so there could have been casualties based on that, but this is basically the uh, human shield tactic of the Ukraine. And who's running the Ukraine military? Well, that's in part U.S. generals from Germany. So they're getting their orders from U.S. generals in Germany who said that's okay, just go ahead and do that. And plus, these are the Ukrainians who are trying to push the Russians out. So they don't care about the lives of the ethnic Russian people in Mariupol. They're just trying to stop the Russians from advancing. So, anyway, so here we have Senator Kennedy. He's looking at this uh, portrait, or this image, and he's seeing all the bodies. And of course, the conclusion we're supposed to reach is that these people are all dead because the Russians killed them. So he's starting to get angry. He's getting emotional. He's starting to build up his Oscar-winning performance. So anyway, um, let's let's hear from him for a brief moment. But we're gonna see his oratorial, his persuasive technique he's going to use before he even starts. So let's see that. So he puts the this image down. Oh, and so he's really sad. So he said, I'm going to tell you why I'm putting up. And now he's going to touch his eyes. He's going to cry. He's so sad. Well, didn't the CIA engineer the coup in Ukraine and force the Russians to step in? So uh, why is he being moved if he knew that this was going to result in in a lot of deaths and casualties? Anyway, we all know that he's building up to make the point that we have to seize the Russian frozen assets, and so this was a talk that he gave yesterday, I believe. So anyway, this is and here he is again, putting his hand on his cheek. He's so moved. He's so emotional. He can't control himself. He's trying to find the words. So anyway, and our tax dollars are paying for all this, the clown show at the U.S. Senate. All these warmongers who are, getting together and pushing all these narratives. The unjustified, full scale invasion of Russia into Ukraine, all this stuff. So, anyway, I've touched on the history a little bit. And so, anyway, he's building up to his point, and let's listen to that.
That belongs to Russia. And it's been sitting there.
So the funds, the frozen Russian assets are sitting there, and they could be helping who? Ukraine. Well, if let's just say if Ukraine could grab those assets, they would have already. Who wants to grab the assets? The United States. And then after they have 300 billion, is it all going to go to Ukraine? Possibly, possibly not. But anyway, this is highway robbery. This is like the federal government coming and uh, to take money from anyone's bank account anywhere in the world. That's just you know um, like the British pirates who would go on the high seas and steal the Spanish gold from their galleons and murder the Spanish people who were on the boat and rape the women, and then they would put statues for the pirates in their city squares. So piracy has been a part of the big hegemonic empires for a long time. We know it's something they can just find any motivation from anywhere, any justification. So anyway, he made this point that we got to go and get those frozen Russian assets. They're just sitting there, and they could help those poor Ukrainians. Okay, so anyway, now he's going to make another point of when do we need to take those frozen Russian assets?
We need to do that while we're working out what I think will be equally as effective, maybe more effective, this issue of sanctions. But we need to do it now.
So basically, there's some urgency for us to go and, highway robbery, steal these frozen Russian assets in Belgium. And of course, you know that the Belgian government already said no. They said no, they would not touch those. EuroClear said, hey, these assets are not leaving EuroClear because if they allow those assets to be stolen, then there's going to be a run on the bank. The Saudis, the Chinese, anyone else who thinks that in the future they could be on the wrong side of the U.S., they're going to pull their money out, and they've warned that this could do major damage to the euro, and also it would tank that EuroClear, and that's an important company in Belgium. And so Belgium said, no, we're not going to allow it. So why is the U.S. pushing this if EuroClear and Belgium said no? Well, anyway, the point here is the U.S. citizen is paying for these clowns to sit in Washington, warmongering, pushing all of these narratives, trying to carry out, uh, break international law. And they say, well, Russia already broke international law. Okay, well, I already explained to you that the Russian government tried to mediate the two sides, the breakaway regions with Kiev, and Kiev would not have anything, would not listen, would not act. They were supposed to give the breakaway regions autonomy, and they didn't do that. And even when the Russian forces were on the outskirts of Kiev, they still didn't comply. So then Russia said, that's it, we're done. And so I'm wondering here, who broke international law? Was it the countries that did the coup in 2014 and put in a uh, very anti-Russian, and in some aspects of it, neo-Nazi government, or was it Russia that stepped in to protect the rights and the self-determination of the ethnic Russian people? So I'll leave that up to you. And thank you for joining me today for this Oscar-winning performance of Senator John Kennedy, a real gem in the U.S. Political establishment, and incredible that we have him in Washington looking out for the U.S. interests and for international law. And by the way, he said, we don't want to be the policeman of the planet, but we gotta be. I'm sorry. And so this is this is the same justification that they used to go into Iraq and all the other conflicts that the US has been in. And why are we spending 1 trillion on our defense budget when our roads, our bridges need to be replaced, our airports are old, our transportation systems are decrepit. And so, but all the money has to go to the military, and we have to be policemen. Why? So that you know, so that this whole narrative can continue. So the U.S. hasn't figured out that it's no longer the only big power in the planet, and so it needs to start thinking in terms of two or three instead of just itself. Excuse me. So anyway, um, I think that will do it for Senator John Kennedy. Real gem. And so maybe he'll come back for more gems in the future. I don't know. But he's certainly one of the worst U.S. senators. But the whole breed of U.S. senators we have in Washington are really poor. They haven't looked out for American interests. They're only looking out for warmongering and to continue conflicts. And so I am sure that with people like him in Washington, this war in Ukraine won't be over anytime soon. So that's my report for today. I hope you have a wonderful Thursday, and we'll come back for another video soon. Bye bye.